We've got a couple of issues that we're supposed to, and hopefully we'll get to during this time. One is to talk a little bit about the Reconnecting West Seattle, what you've heard in the community, what your thoughts are, and issues and questions that you think need to be addressed, and then the cost benefit analysis and kind of where you are on that, what you think is good about it, what you think needs to be changed, or what you think needs to be explored more fully. So with that, reconnecting West Seattle. So what have folks heard about the plans in your areas?
Hi, this is Erin. I still continue to hear concerns about, the traffic backups in Soto. And we did get a little bit of feedback on the survey. We didn't have as many people from Soto fill it out as other neighborhoods, but the number that filled it out for Soto, I think, is a record for a survey out of Soto. So we're feeling pretty proud about that response. And there was concern that some of the projects were projects that are already undergoing and underway and have different funding sources. And there was a concern that that there was less there, even the projects that seemed to be aimed at freight were really aimed at bicycles. And there was a lot of concern about extension, adding additional bicycle lanes to First and Fourth, and that raised a serious panic reaction in some of my businesses.
That freight movement would be compromised in some way by new bicycle lanes in those areas.
Right, because we have the Soto Trail on Fifth, and there's new protected bike lanes going in on East Marginal, and that's a project that's been underway. And there's some reference in the survey and it to First Avenue and to Fourth. And for Fourth, it's less about freight movement and more about we have several industrial businesses along Fourth that have to load large trucks, which means they often block Fourth Avenue with their trucks and are concerned about the potential to add bike lanes on either of those streets, both of which are heavy haul streets. And it seemed like the combination of bikes and a heavy haul street didn't make a lot of sense.
Were there any, where are the choke points in Soto that you're concerned about?
The choke points that we're concerned about is definitely marginal and accessing, as John mentioned in our previous conversation, the port has days that ships come in, and so those days it could come to a total standstill. It kind of already does, and because there are so many tracks stacked up, and then if we're trying to move, commuter traffic through that, and a lot of these trucks start lining up at 3 or 4 a.m. so that they can get in line to get through the port system. So they're already in place prior to peak AM. The other issue is around, we're very excited. We've heard from the Lander Street team that we are looking at a September opening of Lander Street, which is going to be amazing. But we do have, even prior to that, we do have some choke points around Fourth. And this is based on the Seattle squeeze data when all of that traffic moved off of 99. We saw a lot of choke points on Fourth by Spokane, and during that process, the city deployed SPD officers to direct traffic at kind of our key choke points, and that was very successful. So that is something I just want to flag for this group, that as we start to return to normal traffic, whenever that may be, that, some traffic control may be very helpful in Soto.
Okay. Deb, you've got your hand up. Deb, I've got a request for you, and you reported back for us, for my group last time, 2 weeks ago. you had kept very good notes. So I'm going to ask you if you'd be willing to do that role again when we go back into the larger group. And if there's no objection to that. Great. Unmute. There you
There
go.
we go. Yes, I believe I can do that, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to share things that I've heard from the communities about the priorities and the survey. This is a quote: "The surveys are crap," is what I've heard. And I've heard this, unfortunately, from folks who are in the neighborhoods and folks who are in higher echelons within the city. But the surveys are crap. Highland Park community had a very long list of issues. Many of their topics of concern were things that Aaron just referenced, with duplication, things that are already funded and technically should be underway, are listed. And why would you have to vote twice? I know that SDOT has been trying to explain that, and I had a very long reply from Danielle with SDOT about that. That it's it's the first temperature taking, if you will, in a COVID kind of way, but not COVID. But still, the neighborhood, definitely HPAC, Highland Park, and its surrounding area was very concerned and fairly dismissive of what's in the documents, and so that was disheartening, because HPAC is a really savvy group. And if they were thinking that the survey wasn't worth the price of beans, I feared for it. So I was trying to let folks know and share HPAC's concerns. The issues and questions that I'd like to see addressed in the draft plans are how to really take a look at beyond these actual Reconnect West Seattle surveys and the ongoing, and how to deal with areas and assist areas that haven't been included within the surveys. I've personally been working with the Sylvan Way neighborhoods, trying to get them into the loop, if you will. But Fauntleroy has expressed concerns dealing with ferries and that sort of access. And then I think everyone is really worried about what happens with the West Marginal non-freight detours, and how that when all of that traffic goes to the upper peninsula, if you will, instead of taking West Marginal Way to, if any further restrictions are put on West Marginal Way. So those sorts of things need to get addressed in the draft plan.
When you say more restrictions, what?
There's as Heather shared with us, I can't even remember when anymore, Heather. The focus on West Marginal Way of a freight priority corridor. And however that occurs, if that reduces lanes for non-freight, where would those vehicles go? Because not all of them are going to get on the bus.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on the Reconnect West Seattle? What you're hearing in your area? What concerns you have?
Dan Austin here. One thing that I've had pointed out to me, and I just like a little clarification on West Marginal Way. People were hoping that would get addressed, is that the bump out by the Longhouse where they're providing the pedestrian safety access.
Yeah.
Just an SDOT question. It looks like there's room for a sidewalk to go in there. Why is there not a sidewalk build in reopening that second lane? Is that a funding issue, or is that not technically feasible?
Was that Dan? I missed who was talking.
I think that was Dan.
Yeah,
Right?
that was me.
Good question, Dan. We're actually working on a new profile for West Marginal Way that's not quite ready for prime time, but part of that new profile is adding immediately adding a low-cost sidewalk right there, where there's sort of a kind of a goat path. We're going to make it a little smoother and nicer and cut back the blackberries so that there's more pedestrian access.
But would that open that lane back up that bottlenecks in that one section if there was a sidewalk put in?
No, what that's about is people crossing the street. And so it's shortening the crossing distance. What would change the need for that is a traffic signal right there at the Longhouse or near the Longhouse, which is
that a
under
potential?
It's under consideration. It's pretty expensive, and it's going to take a while because we have to work with the railroads to get permission to put it in. And I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of working with the railroads, but it's not easy or quick.
It's not pretty.
Thanks for addressing that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Heather, I need more clarification. Not so much the survey instrument as it is with what we're doing on the ground. To me, in my personal experience, the biggest choke point is the intersection of West Marginal Way and Highland Parkway and whatever the street name is to the east.
You and everyone else.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Yeah, me and my 3,000 closest friends at any given time. So
Yeah.
what is the opportunity to re-engineer that intersection in a manner similar to what Chelan and Spokane, you guys did some immediate work there that gave people an opportunity to see where they were going and get in the right lane at the right time. So what can we do to the capacity of that intersection and the throughput?
So I'm not a traffic engineer, as you know. I do know that there are some channelization. Channelization means the lines on the street. There are some channelization changes that we could make. There are very few things that we can do from a signal perspective. One of the things that we have to, it's a very, very complicated, very heavily used intersection.
Yeah.
And so we have to make sure that whatever change we make doesn't make it worse inadvertently. And so the traffic engineers are being really careful to make sure that whatever change we make there is going to be a good positive change for all the movements. I think one of the things that you're seeing right now is that that intersection used to be a lot more about freight than about individual vehicles. And so I think the additional volume, as well as different kinds of people experiencing what it's like, are creating some of this this interest. And so the traffic, this is like our number one spot that we're cracking our heads trying to figure out what to do. And I wish it were as simple as the 5-way intersection, but it isn't.
Okay. It is a very complicated intersection, and it is a very, I would guess, level of service E at best.
Yeah,
So,
or worse.
and there's plenty of concrete there.
Oh, sure.
There are large islands that have been created over time that could perhaps be undone and provide some additional throughput. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we're going to be at this for several years, I would like to see an engineering analysis of what could be done at that
Right.
particular choke point to
Right.
to increase the throughput.
Yeah, they're doing that right now.
Okay.
They're engaged in that right now.
Okay.
I just want to say to that respect, I would hope that the traffic engineers are looking at this not with the best practices, but in the whole, this is an emergency and this is not a forever plan. I know it's probably hard for engineers to do because they're
No, it's not. It's not difficult for them to do. They are, however, bound by a number of things, including their license, and they are also bound by the rules that put the city at risk if something terrible were to happen.
Totally get that.
And so they're being very careful, and I get at least 3 emails a day from outside the city and probably 7 a day from inside the city about this topic. I note John Persek has some remarks. John?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. And first, I want to, circle back to the conversation about what are you hearing in the community. And so I want to go back to the survey, and we had a pretty good
John?
Yeah.
Peter Steinbrook was asking for, so let me get to Peter and then
Okay.
talk about what you've heard. And okay.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. Am I being heard? I can't tell.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. For some reason, have not been able to get a hand icon until just now. I don't know. Somebody from heaven dropped in a hand icon. Wave your hand. Anyway, thanks. I just had two questions regarding the issues on the Reconnect West Seattle on freight and bike priority lists that were completed by those interests, including the port, Northwest Seaport, and the city's freight advisory board. How have they being managed together or melded, if that's the case, to balance commute interests by bicycle mode and industrial activities, whereby maritime has to get to and from the water side and the harbor and doesn't have options. So I just wanted to raise that as an issue in terms of the two different modes. And there are some incompatibilities, but not impossible to manage that, but it needs to be intentional. That's all. So I don't, if somebody wants to respond or not, that's fine. Thank you.
Heather, someone on your team there?
Well, I mean, it's just me, Greg.
Okay.
So I will say that the Reconnect West Seattle plan is going to take into consideration all of those tidbits, all the feedback that we have had from the neighbors, from the neighborhoods, as well as the feedback that we're still getting from those paper ballots. We're taking into consideration all the feedback we've had from freight, all the feedback we've had from the bicycle community, as well as the survey responses. So we make a distinction between the survey and the ballots. So the neighborhood ballots are about neighborhood traffic calming. The Reconnect West Seattle survey is about how do you think you're going to get to work, and what do you need from us to make a different kind of choice. So that's why it's going to take us another couple of weeks to put that all together into a draft plan, because we have to balance all of those needs and all of those interests. And just, you can tell I need a vacation, but this exactly what we are doing right now is the sort of planning exercise that would normally take SDOT a year or more. And we're doing it in a couple of months, because we need to, we get it. I live in West Seattle. You guys all live, in West Seattle or have business here or live in the Duwamish Valley. And so we're barreling through a planning exercise that would normally get a lot more time. I know there has been concern, and I acknowledge it and appreciate it, that the surveys weren't perfect. They were not perfect because we pulled them together in a matter of days in order to respond to the needs in the community. And we did the best we could, and we did the best we could to make sure that things that have already been considered weren't included. However, I would also like to note that simultaneous with the failure of the West Seattle Bridge, we also have this global pandemic, which is impacting revenue like you can't believe. And so some of those projects that everyone is counting on may or may not go forward because we just don't have the money. And so part of the reason for including some of those is making sure that we understood what is important to the community right now. Lots of things have changed since the last time anybody asked the question.
I understand those challenges, Heather. I just want to make sure that we've learned something from the missing link 20-year, challenge and the safety issues that invariably are risen through, potential conflicts. So it's just about putting safety first, really. And I know you understand all that thing. So that's all.
Always.
Super.
Yep. That's
John?
our, yep.
Sorry, John, that I had interrupted you, but go ahead.
No problem at all. Always good to see Commissioner Steinbruck on the call. Appreciate your remarks.
You too, John.
So, circling back to Georgetown, first of all, I want to thank SDOT and the Department of Neighborhoods for making the effort to do the outreach to get some good responses to the ballot. We got over 200, and over 200 for our neighborhood is pretty damn good. If those are all folks that live here and work here or own businesses here, I'd say that's a pretty good poll. Having said that, I know that there's always going to be a limitation to that kind of a process. So I don't have any kind of expectation that that's going to be anything other than a snapshot of everybody's current understanding and what happens to be happening right now. And I think really, given the fact that SDOT is really trying to pull this together in a short amount of time, I think it would be really worth it for a team of engineers to come down to Georgetown and just get a set of eyes on some of the troubled spots. We did have Morales come down with at least one of her staffers so that she could take a look. And it's a really quick way to, just at least get a subjective understanding of what's going on, because data just takes a long time to compile. We were able to get traffic counts from SDOT, and we appreciate that, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of numbers we have to crunch and so that we can make sense of those. And meanwhile, the process, it continues to move forward. So that's one of the things we're hearing, aside from the, the overwhelming choices, the ability to really understand what those are was, another challenge to us. And then also the remark I've heard is that there's a concern that whatever projects do get selected in Georgetown, that they need to be centered on the small businesses and the residents who lived here, or rather who live here. I know that there are projects that the freight community want that would probably also benefit our community, but I think there's a fear that the city will just simply fund those projects and say, hey, look, Georgetown and freight agree on these projects and we're going to fund them, but ultimately they're freight-centered projects. And so I think there's a real appetite to make sure that there are also projects that protect the residents as well as take care of the, quite honestly, struggling small businesses here. We've had a number already go away and close down because of COVID. And, it's not going to take much to send some more over the edge. So I just want to elevate those issues. And, again, thanks for giving, Georgetown a piece of this. And, we do have plans to sit down with the city next week. We're working on a date, and we're going to make sure we bring as many people to that conversation as we possibly can. So thank you.
John, what are the choke points from your perspective, and how well do the project universe address the choke points that your folks are most concerned about?
It's hard to know. I'll tell you that 4th in Michigan, 1st in Michigan, Corson in Michigan, pretty much everything along Michigan are the real areas of concern. And that's especially when the First Avenue Bridge pops open during the commuting hours. And what we're seeing is the spillover into the residential areas, or we have trucks trying to travel streets that aren't designed for trucks of any length.
Right.
And there's a lot of frustrated people, and we know that that's not going to get any better. And having guardrails between what's going to happen on those major freight streets and arterials versus what happens in the residential communities, I think is going to be a key to making sure that our issues get addressed.
Okay.
So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Ann?
So I'm thinking about the short timeline, and John, you mentioned it, and so did Heather, and that this is a really important process to go through right now to understand where we are and make decisions. What I'm worried about is that the decisions will be made, and then there's just going to be this stop on it, or I know that there won't, Heather, but that the public will perceive that this is sort of the end of the line. And so that SDOT puts some really clear reporting opportunities in place for the public, especially as new trouble spots pop up or things change or traffic increases or whatever there is, that there's a really clear way for people to report to SDOT what's going on and what their concerns are, so that they don't feel like it's the end of the conversation about these things.
Heather's acknowledging that. All right, unless there's anyone else on this issue, let's move on to the cost benefit analysis and what your thoughts are, what you've been hearing about the direction that study is headed. The first question that I have, Heather, is remind us again of the timeline for that. It's addressing a lot of things, but it's critical to making the decision whether repair is desirable or not. So what's the timing on this and the interaction between that timing and our work?
Okay, so by tomorrow, we need to give to WSP, our engineering consultant, who they're doing the actual work of the CBA. There's math and stuff that has to be done. So we need to give those attributes to them tomorrow, along with our ranking, the weighting, so that they can factor that into their work. From now until October, there's going to be a continual churn of information that comes out of WSP, including what's called the basis of design, as well as some rough order of magnitude costs. Those things are going to come out. We're going to send them through the grist with the TAP. We'll make sure to report back to the community task force. Eventually, in early October is when all of that work will be done, and they will have a completed cost benefit analysis. And I want to just make clear, because I live in West Seattle. I fully understand how stressful this is and how critical the West Seattle Bridge is to our lives over here on this peninsula and to the entire Duwamish Valley. So I want to make clear that the cost benefit analysis that they are doing, we are driving them into the ground to go fast, so that we have something that is both complete and well done, but also is quick enough that we can make a decision, have enough information to make a recommendation to Mayor Durkin in early October. So over the course of the next it's not even a handful, short handful of meetings, because October's not that far away. Like it sounds far away because it's really warm outside, but if you consider that we're going to have one more meeting in August and then a couple of meetings in September, then all of a sudden we're there, right? So that's going to be done at the beginning of October, and with your input and the input of the TAP on that document, we'll be able to make a recommendation to Mayor Durkin. And I just also want to alert you that I brief her each and every Monday, so she's also following along with all of this process. Does that answer your question, Mayor Nichols?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Peter Goldman.
Hi, everybody.
Howdy.
I'm just one thing more clarity in the CBA documents, and it might be subsumed in multimodal, is that whatever we do really needs to take into account future sound transit, and it's not very clear here. There is a column for multimodal impacts, and then when you look at the definition of multimodal, it sort of suggests transit, but it's not very clear. So the idea is that whatever we do now really should and must take into account our long-term regional goal of hooking up West Seattle to sound transit. And so I don't see that as a very clear breakout point. And I'm wondering if you think it's a little bit more clarity.
I made that comment several times in my feedback too.
Forward compatibility, the attribute called forward compatibility, is 100% about light rail.
Maybe you could use like some non-engineering legal some term, compatibility with future light rail or some, some forward compatibility. That's kind
Well,
of
we're going to be, yeah, we're going to be done with this though in like tomorrow. So as long as you guys understand what forward compatibility means, which means this bridge will be forward compatible with whatever comes along. A repair option will not be forward compatible. A replacement option could be forward compatible. That's the question here. So forward compatibility is 100% about light rail.
And just consider an asterisk or something explaining that it wouldn't take that much long, just because folks don't know what that means. And just so I think it only helps the cities that they're considering everything. That's all, just simple wordsmithing.
Okay.
And when we say it has everything to do with light rail, does that mean that it is designed to potentially accommodate light rail on replacement, or that it's not blocking access for light rail to have its own crossing?
In this instance, if you, the CTF, weigh forward compatibility high, what you are saying is it is very important to you that the repair or replacement considers forward compatibility. So if forward compatibility is the most important thing to you and to everyone, we will end up with a replacement rather than a repair. So these attributes are weighted, and the repair and replace option, and replace includes both a bridge and a tunnel, just before everybody gets all excited. That it really does. So we're going to compare those three choices to the attributes. And so repair will not score well when it comes to the forward compatibility attribute, right? It will score well.
No, let me push back on that, because when we talk repair, we're not talking about a permanent solution there. We are talking about a relatively short-term solution that allows us then to do replacement in a much more
that's right,
leisurely fashion or
that's right,
conventional fashion.
Right.
Which, by the way, would take us to about the same timeline as light rail plans on opening.
Absolutely. So this is about an immediate decision. Are we going to do repair first, or are we going to pivot directly to replacement? Yes, that is what we're deciding right now. Are we going to repair and then replace, or are we going to pivot directly to replacement? And so if we pivot directly to replacement, direct replacement is going to score better for forward compatibility than repair. So if forward compatibility is your top one, then repair is not gonna do well.
I just hope that the folks who are doing this evaluation know that.
They do. What do you mean? You or the engineers?
The engineers. They get. Okay. I just hope so, because it was news to me.
they invented it. So yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask one question? Where is transit on pairing up with replacement? And also, I've had different people talk to me about, if we had light rail on the bridge now, granted this one doesn't hold it, but do we want to put all of our eggs into one superstructure in an earthquake region? Versus, if the monorail was on the upper bridge right now, we'd be in the world of hurt because no transit is working.
So I think Sound Transit and SDOT both are open to having light rail on the replacement structure, whatever it turns out to be. There are good reasons to include Sound Transit on the structure, and there are good reasons to not include Sound Transit on the structure. And so we want to understand whether we're in a position where we're pivoting directly to replacement, where the time available to have that discussion is shorter, or if we're going to want to do repair and then replacement, where we have a much longer time to have to pair those construction projects up appropriately, for us to have a longer conversation with particularly the West Seattle community about how changing the alignment of light rail onto the new bridge would would change things. And so everybody's still open to it, but there are good reasons to do it and there are good reasons not to do it.
But Heather, the way you just described that would argue that repair and then replacement would be more favorable to a forward compatibility, because
only if we assume that we are going to replace it after we repair it, because it's possible that we come up with a repair job that could last 40 years. I don't think that's possible, but it could be that the engineers come up with that. So repairing it immediately doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to replace it in 10 years or 15 years. It doesn't necessitate that. It depends on how long the repair will last.
When does that engineering information come out? Because that seems like to make any smart decision on.
Yeah. Well, we have to decide if we're going to pivot to replacement first. So if we go to replacement, then we'll do all the engineering and that'll tell us how long that will take.
But if it lasts for 40, if it could last for 40 years, do we need to make that decision in the next 6 months on a replacement? Am I missing something here?
Maybe I don't understand your question.
My question is, you said we might be able to get you don't think, but they might be able to get an option where there's a 40-year repair, some other greatly larger number. When would that be determined, what the repair actually could look like? Is that
in the design? In the design. So after we make the decision to repair, we know that the repair, the engineers say that whatever repair we do can last as long as 15 years. We might be able to get longer than that, but we won't know that until we're into design. And we're not going to design a repair until we decide that that's the direction that we're going to go. So at the point where we know how long the repair is going to last, that has an implication for the eventual replacement.
And Heather,
when we're all dead.
If I could just add the current.
Oh, thank God you're here, Scott.
Well, the current repair is 15 plus years is what they're saying, and the TAP is currently questioning why that cannot be longer.
And Scott, what do we need to know in order to make that determination? Because we were talking about a shoring that would be a couple of years, which would then give us the planning time for a replacement. A 15-year fix gives us a lot more opportunity to look at that. And if it's longer than that, then really the replacement issue is not on the table for a while.
Right, and we are asking WSP that right now. Actually, though, just the reality is there's at least 6 different entities asking them so many things. That is the TAP's primary focus right now. Is this, and while the contractor right now is implementing the stabilization plan, which has already started, they will learn more about the bridge. So if it continues to behave, so if you remember, the non-destructive evaluation came out much better than most people were expecting. And that's likely where the 10-year went to 15 plus. I don't exactly know how that happened, but then as they get there for more, and if they put on the CFRP sheets, and if things behave well and they don't see anything that was unexpected, then they may have more confidence in either verifying the 15 plus or maybe going a little more.
Well, and if you really want something mind-blowing, they're not really going to know about that until the bridge has gone through a complete year of a thermal cycle. So we don't have any idea how this bridge is going to respond to cold.
That's right. I did see a hand up, but you're right. Part of this stabilization is to release those bearings on Pier 18. So that should improve the temperature as well. Thermal reaction. Yeah.
Peter Steinbruck.
Oh, thank you, Chair Nichols. I think we're still on the topic of the forward compatibility, or maybe we moved on, but I just wanted to make a couple of quick points there, that it does list more than just 100% light rail as the consideration. In the column that says, what does this mean? It lists, will it meet waterway navigational needs? To that, we respond from the port and seaport that there is more to this in the long term. At first, I was having difficulty understanding what was meant by that term, forward compatibility, but it certainly needs to allow flexibility for future reconfigurations of the roadways in the area, the rail corridor, the possibility of the rail bridge being taken down at some point and replaced, and obviously compatibility with marine terminal operations that include maritime and rail. So I just wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, the primary thing for forward compatibility with replacement has to do with there is a business that is upriver on the Duwamish who would like the new bridge to be higher, which
oh boy, higher than it already is.
Okay. Yeah, that is going to be a big problem for everybody. So, well, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to discuss that further.
We just can't ignore these long-term considerations, so we don't include options.
Right.
Okay. So anyone, we've got about 2 minutes or 1 minute, and anyone who hasn't had a chance to say anything. David?
Yeah, thanks. And this is a little bit of a left turn from what we've been talking about, and I think the forward compatibility is a great convo. I agree that putting it in labor terms is going to be helpful, though I definitely ranked it high because I see the future implications. I just want to chime in on the equity component because it's a fascinating mind puzzle, factoring in equity to a public works project. And I would say echo, I personally would echo, I think is it Kelly who chimed in earlier, who may not be on the call, but about jobs and equitable prioritization of jobs. And then maybe, I mean, this is I recognize that this represents a lot of people in a lot of positions of decision-making, which is more reflective of a lack of equity more broadly, but this is a very homogenous task force. And just, I don't know what it looks like in terms of decision-making going forward, but I would say looking at equity in that matrix, I did not rank it very high, though I consider, since our organization represents a lot of diverse communities, I see that as part of my role on this task force. But I would think diversifying the voices in the decision-making tables going forward would be a good decision for a variety of voices and equity criteria more internally. That was just a thought I had because I want to prioritize equity through this project, but I couldn't figure out how to prioritize it over constructability for it's a public works project. So I know that's a mind puzzle and it's sort of a curveball from what we were just talking about, but if some folks in my community were chiming into this task force and considering equity, it would look real white. So I don't know what the next phase of task forcing is or decision making, but I just wanted to elevate that as a consideration.
Thank you. All right, we are due back into the other group, so get yourself out of this one and find the link to the bigger group, and we will reconvene almost immediately. Thank you all very much.